order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Oh,
You did it right this time. I like that.
roll call, please.
Kristen Kambenzi,
Here.
Glenn Sarka, James Hewitt,
Here.
Jennifer Clip,
Here.
Jennifer Ray,
Here.
Cheryl Maddox Smith,
Here.
Jason Zadunik,
Here.
All right, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Zadunik, support by Mr. Hewitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of March 4th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole meeting, the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting from March 4th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Clip, support by Mrs. Maddox Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to discussion items, starting with Mr. Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mrs. Kambenzi. Just briefly on facilities, I know I forwarded some emails, but our project at Bothwell, the HVAC replacement project, is underway. And if you've been to Bothwell, you've seen some activity. They got pretty creative and actually created a stairway so they could access the roof without going inside of the building. I thought that was clever. So they were able to install there's 3 units on the roof of Bothwell. Each unit has a heating and a cooling component. So they were able to get all the heating coils or components replaced and stage the cooling units, which is on schedule. The cooling units still need to be installed, and that should be completed before the warm weather comes along, which will be a welcome change for folks at Bothwell, students and staff, since that building gets quite warm in the spring, late spring going into summer. So in regard to that project, as great as it is that they're on track, as usually is the case, there's always some unexpected changes. So the design, we're working with Rhodes Engineering out of Traverse City, who did the design work, the architects for this particular project, which is complex, but and forgive me for speaking in layman's terms, I'm not necessarily a mechanical engineer by any stretch, but I'll try to be one tonight for you. For each of the 3 units, there's 6 compressors in each unit. The wiring required to get those functioning properly is more complicated than the original design, architectural design called for. So there's a potential of a change order that would exceed the threshold I'm able to approve, and we may need to bring the project back to the board. So we're looking at that design work to see if the design work called for the proper wiring scheme or not, yet to be determined. But I just wanted to put it on your radar in case I do have to bring it to the next meeting. There were some change orders that we can address. I talked about damper unit. There's 3 damper units to go with the 3 units. One of the damper units is not working. That we're going to deal with through the contingency. The board had approved a $30,000 contingency, so that's well within the scope of the contingency. There's also some control panels. There's 6 motors. This is different than the compressors, as I understand it, which are controlled by these control panels that more or less, instead of the motors starting a hard start, a hard stop, the control panels will actually vary the speeds of those motors so as to draw from some and not others. Again, part of that sophisticated design I don't completely understand. Isaac Robert, that's also probably going to be one that falls within the contingency, at least one of those units that's not currently working. If we were to replace all the units, that's where we'd have to revisit the $30,000 contingency. Long story short, Isaac Roberts, GEI engineer, plans on coming to our April 22nd meeting, and he will answer questions then. That's where the board would actually approve any change to the project. Right now, I'm just putting it on your radar. In addition to the HVAC unit, I've previously mentioned some roofs that are in disrepair. The MSHS CTE roof is going to be first on our list. We're going to have a roofing manufacturer from Carlisle come in April 16th, do a walkthrough on and take a look at that roof. That one's going to go out to bid on April 26th. We already know that needs to be replaced. We're also forecasting a potential fix at Sandy Knoll. Since the rep will be here on the 16th, we'll have him take a look at the Sandy Knoll roof and give us a recommendation on how to proceed. Previous meeting, Isaac Roberts and I had talked to the Board of Education about some other projects that are in the hopper. So playgrounds, or I should say outdoor learning spaces, certainly towards the top of our list, something we've been working on for a while. Superior Hills, Grave Rat, Sandy Knoll, all been working with GEI and committees within their building, including parents and staff. They'll have some recommendations for us soon. Superior Hills looks like they may be ready even for our next meeting. Cherry Creek is targeting the summer of '25. They're still doing the design work, getting input from the parents and the students and the staff. I also talked about some safety-related projects, infrastructure projects that are underway. As I said in the last meeting, already out to bid. You've already approved bids on PA systems, radio systems, security cameras. The critical incident maps are all done. So that's all squared away, ready to go. But I did want to forecast potentially adding another safety project with some grant dollars that we weren't sure whether or not we would have available, and could be upwards of $250,000 that we could see for safety. And we've been looking at a safety film that can be added to glass, especially on our main entrances or any large openings. And that film is recommended from the group SEC that did our safety audit. And with that type of revenue, we could certainly cover a lot of territory with that film. So that's something we're looking at as a potential project with that additional safety money. As Jim mentioned in previous meeting, grants is a bit of a moving target. So not necessarily making promises, but the nice thing about committee of the whole is I can just put things on your radar, and then when it's finalized, you're not surprised. So I guess I'll just keep going. Unless anybody has any questions for me? No? Okay. The board had asked me to take a look at pay to play as something to consider. Moving forward, we have had some conversations previously about pay to play, different ways that we could help families, support families and kids that are participating in those district-sponsored sports, and that's important to make sure I clarify these are for district-sponsored sports. And ran some figures on potentially reducing the overall family cap for pay to play, which is currently $800 to $500. I should say that without any cap, based on the numbers that I have in front of me, we're about $42,650 that would come in were there to be no cap. With the $800 cap, right around $38,900. So that's already a reduction of $3,750. And if we were to reduce down to 500 from 800, would bring that number down to 28,500, which would be another 10,400. So a little over almost $14,000 savings overall that would occur if we were to reduce that family cap to $500. So I wanted to give you that preliminary information. Again, not necessarily a deep dive, but working with Athletic Director Tizio, he was able to help pull some of that information together. I also had him run some basic figures on the implications of waiving admissions for students and staff for athletic contests. And with activity with that approval from the board, we've seen about $4,400, or the families have seen a reduction of $4,400. The district has absorbed that, what would normally come in through gate as a result of that decision. So wanted to tack that on too, just to kind of capture the whole picture of how much savings there might be to families' cost to district for those two items. Any questions on pay to play?
So 4,400 that is current with the
Admissions.
admissions.
Mhm.
And then I just wanna make sure I'm clear on this, so it's, sorry. So it's 38.9 if, and then 28.5 for the 500 if it's, versus the 800 cap, correct?
Correct.
And then the additional cost is 10,400, but you threw in a 3,000 something, right?
Yeah, I gave you, if there were to be no family cap, like right now, the family cap's 800.
Okay.
If we didn't have any family cap, that would be.
I see. And
right,
what is
so
that
would be
initial?
42,650.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I did have some additional comments if, did anybody else have anything else before? I didn't want to cut anybody off.
No,
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would say go for, yeah, go
Go
first.
for it.
Yeah.
So essentially what, I think everybody was sent a copy of the policy that we have for this school year. So what I would propose that we would look at doing for the next board meeting, given the numbers that were presented to us, is to make an adjustment to the policy for the 2024-2025 school year under item number 7 to change the $800 per family cap to $500, and then make a reduction of 20 or 25%, whatever the board would like, or if there was a direction, in the participation fee, which is provided on page 2 of the policy. So that would be reduced across the board by an even amount. The reason for the changes is that when this was originally brought up for discussion, I believe middle to end of last summer, the athletic director had provided a participation survey fee, or I'm sorry, a participation fee survey of senior high results from across the state of Michigan for the 2021 and the 2022 school years. And what those surveys noted, and the response rates were significant per school year. And what they showed was the annual maximum fee per family breakdown in 2021 and 2022 was a median of $300, and for the median in 2022-2023 was a median per family fee of $350. And with Marquette being at 800, obviously we were quite a bit north of that average. Additionally, those surveys showed the per fee per team student breakdown showed a median in 2022-2023 of $100 per activity. And so obviously based on the fee range that you can see on page 2, our fees are quite a bit north of that. So what these adjustments would be aimed at is getting a little bit closer towards the median of the schools that do charge. And of the schools that were surveyed, 59% of schools in 2022 and 2023 were not assessing, were not assessing a fee in 2022 or 2020 and 2021. 59% of schools were not assessing a fee. So again, bringing us in alignment with some of those schools that were or are assessing fees. And so that's the reason for the adjustment.
You spoke about numbers and you know where I'm at about that. We need to go slow here. So you're suggesting, if I'm understanding correctly, $500 cap, and then just 20 or 25% across the activity?
Correct.
Right, just consistently, okay.
And I understand, and, you know, based on the way the current structure sits, there will be some activities and extracurricular activities that are going to have a greater impact and a reduction just based on the
Sure.
percentage across the board. However, they're just really, unless somebody has a better suggestion, I didn't see a better way or more equitable way to do
Equitable,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And it would still just be school-funded sports?
For the activities listed on page 2 of the policy, which goes through all of the different school-sponsored activities by season.
Okay, so 20 to 25% for school-funded sports.
Correct.
Across the board,
across the
consistent.
board.
Correct.
And then the cap down to 500.
Correct.
Yep,
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that still will bring us a little bit north of where the schools that do charge a little bit north of those averages, but I think it's right in alignment with, especially when you start to, because those numbers are skewed a little bit because the smaller schools don't seem to be charging the same as some of the bigger
Sure.
schools, and so, you know, you have to take that, you know, into consideration a bit, so I think that puts us right into,
Yeah.
yeah,
For
right
sure.
in, right into a little bit more of an alignment of where some of those other schools are.
Can we get some, you know, numbers, kind of how that would impact the bottom line as well? Just for comparison of like, you know, this is what we bring in currently, and then we often do the math of 25% reduction of that and what that impact would be, so when we just know overall the whole impact. I mean, I think it's a great thing. Obviously, we all know having kids active and also just involved in something team-oriented. So the physical part as well as, you know, emotional well-being is important. So, I mean,
Yeah, I had numbers, Jen, to your point, and I don't remember them offhand. I don't want
No.
to say, you know,
Yeah.
publicly, but I did remember at one point we had the discussion. I know that that's available, and we can certainly
exactly, yeah.
get that available.
Just so we know what that bottom line piece is, like, this is really helpful of understanding the pieces here for the family cap. And then also what we have currently, revenues that we would have normally gotten from attendance, entry fees. So, no, that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, maybe we
think
could
it
have
sounds like a
like
really great idea.
I do too.
a couple of different levels, like if we did 20%, 25%, like what the difference there is. And I think one thing too we need to realize is that this is for now.
Right,
It may or may not be sustainable forever.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's why obviously we'll look at that, we can revisit that. So the motion would be to start that with the 2024-2025 school year.
Sure.
And obviously if an adjustment, if for some, you know, we do very well, maybe that can be reduced in the future. If things aren't looking great, then maybe that could be revisited. However, I think it's something that, you know, that would be a good thing for us to take a look at, so.
For sure.
and just to add to that, I know that, excuse me, I know other activities, my teacher brain always goes to this. At the end of the day, our job is to prepare our students for the 21st century. We know that the more we get kids involved, the stats are so clear on what that does for mental health, what that does for community pride. I would be remiss if I didn't think about the system's more complex. I know we talked about this a couple of months ago. But anything that kids are doing outside of the, you know, 1st through 7th hours of school, any way we can make that equitable for all kids, to prepare them, you know, for life outside of these walls, because that is the ultimate goal. So whether it be art, or I know, you know, we have some really big success this year with esports and band. I do understand that system is a little more complex than the athletic system, but I think it's a great place to start. And to Kristen's point, you know, there's a season for everything, and right now I think this is the season for this, and hopefully we can figure out a way to make this as sustainable as possible for as long as we can, and when and if we have to revisit it, we have to revisit it. That's just life. Fluidity and flexibility, but equity, equity, equity for all kids.
And I do have a breakdown, as a part of that conversation, I was able to find, basically, it looks like a just regular general ledger breakdown of, per activity, dues and fees. And so if anybody wants to take a
Oh,
look at what
thanks.
these are afterwards, maybe get some copies made so you can take a look at the 2022-2023 fiscal year activities and what the dues and fees brought in per activity were. And so if you looked at those
Sure.
as a net result and reduced that by 20% as an example, or 25%, you'll be able to see approximately what that reduction will
What that
be.
That's
Cost would
awesome.
be.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jason. That's great.
And I mean, if we don't make a motion in, this month in April, I think having all of these numbers and looking at exactly what it is we do want to do, if it's a 25% across, how that affects the bottom line, and then in May voting on it, like, just so that we have all of the data in front of us, and finally kind of looking at what exactly how it affects the bottom line. And I think it's great, and I do think we do it until we can't, and right now, every little bit for a family is, as we know, helps, so.
Yeah,
This
that's
is a
right.
nice way to help families, I think.
And kids, most importantly.
Exactly.
Kids.
Yeah, it would take into effect, certainly, I think, when do we start collecting fees for fall? Probably in August or?
Yeah, we don't, our athletic staff isn't even in until early August, and that would be when it really ramps up.
Okay. And so adjusting the policy based on that, I don't think it would take a lot, but it would be nice for families to know and be able to budget and have enough time to be able to budget and plan for the fall, so.
If you're interested, Mr. Lampman just did some approximating because he has access to the information that you alluded to.
And because
So-
he does numbers.
Right, yeah, we were
The number
kind of
guy.
on it as you were talking, so I appreciate the more lengthy discussion there, it gave us a couple extra minutes, so. Mr. Lampman?
So if we're looking at our dues and fees from the 2022-2023 fiscal year, and I'm looking at the same spreadsheet that Mr. Zadunik referenced, we'd be looking at 25% a reduction of $30,287. At 20%, we'd be looking at a reduction of $24,230. Just to give you some context.
I think it's important that you don't add that necessarily to the number I gave you for the family cap, because there's gonna be an overlap, those aren't mutually exclusive.
I was just gonna say that, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll discuss more at our April 22nd meeting. And I think that we could probably do a motion and get this started.
Thank
That
you.
number right there sounds really accessible, and it just shows that we're taking into consideration how all of these costs are affecting families, and I think this is a small, amount of our major budget, so I really like the idea a lot. And equity, doing it across all
Yeah, I mean, it's a
activities.
smallish amount that'll have big impact, I think.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah, again, it's just one of those areas that I feel strongly where you have a family of 4 or a family of 5, and the way things have progressed the last few years, and I think those impacts, just to reduce potentially those conversations where if a student is, that couple $100 of fees, I don't want to have that discussion where somebody is thinking about not participating in an extracurricular activity based on an economic concern. Understandably, there are scholarships available, but the barrier to get there is, based on the way things have changed, can be difficult. So I think that it's just something that would bring us into alignment as well, just based on where the numbers are that we've seen across the state. It's not just me coming up here saying it. So we do have the data to support that as well. So if anybody had any further questions,
No, that's great.
No, but just to add that, even with the economics in play of the last few years, I always think about our most economically vulnerable families who tend to have overlapping risks across the board. Those are the kids that need the anchors. And for some families, it may be can we or can't we, and for other families, it's absolutely not. That's just not even a possibility. So to make things more accessible, it's wonderful. It's great. Thanks for the work.
Thank you. And then I also think that extending the free admissions for students and staff would be something to add on for next
To
meeting too.
continue that,
Mhm.
agreed.
On that, have we had a lot of, have you heard of any, I've heard good feedback from that.
Good feedback.
Really good feedback, especially from the students who love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a win for everyone.
And I just like that this comes at it from so many different directions, that the kids feel it immediately, because sometimes that's their pocket money, that they've earned. And then also, the families and the students feel it from the larger perspective. So it all adds up. And the support, when they talked about that then they can go and support their fellow teammates, that helps, or students.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see, actually, you mentioned the students' pocket money, for admissions. I'd be curious to see if, maybe an increase in concessions kind of offsets that. They bring the same amount of money with them to the game, and maybe they buy it, snacks, whatnot. So.
Mhm. All right, kind of along those same lines, Bay Cliff.
Right. So there have been some discussion about Bay Cliff. It is that time of year where we're gearing up for camp for our 5th graders and 7th graders. And just, I guess, for the audience as much as the board, the elementary students, our 5th graders, attend camp for 3 days and 2 nights. And the middle school students attend Bay Cliff for 5 days and 4 nights. There are, of course, scholarships available for all families if there's any financial hardship. The district covered a total of approximately $16,720 for last school year for the camp. And that was a combination of transportation costs and those costs associated with stipends, since our staff are staying up at camp overnight with the kids. Goes well beyond their normal workday. So this year the total cost for a family to attend Bay Cliff is $75. It's about $150 for the school, but the difference is made up through parent groups, donations, and fundraising. And then the cost for a middle school student is also $150, and those families have the opportunity to do fundraising. They have a card, a fundraising card that they can sell. That is about $10 a piece, so theoretically a family could sell 15 cards and cover the cost of camp. Or they also have calendars, which is a clever fundraising tactic where people can choose a date on the calendar and that matches up with a donation. Those two fundraisers combined, some families decide to just write the check for $150 and be done with it. Other families can reduce the cost upwards of, zero, if they so choose. So the district again covered about $16,000 for stipends and transportation. That was for last year. I did provide some information that more or less breaks it down further for those costs, but wanted to give you a summary. Total cost for camp last year was about $71,000. Total expenses for camp last year was about $51,000, and that was a net loss of about $20,000. There was money to cover that from in the activity account, but if they were to continue incurring that cost over time, that would of course exhaust the money that is in that account. So that does not include the $16,720 the district covered. So perhaps the board can consider maintaining those, absorbing those costs for stipends and transportation. If you wanted to look at covering additional costs, that would be up to you to consider. But again, this is just for discussion. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to provide more information.
Well, I guess part of the reason I wanted to have this on the discussion, because it affects all of our fifth graders and all of our seventh graders, because they all have the opportunity to go. And for someone who, you know, as a fifth grader got to go to camp, I mean, that was probably the highlight of my career at MAPS, was being able to go to camp. I mean, it was just one of those things that, like, I will always remember. I think it's a wonderful program that we have. And, you know, as a parent who had, you know, 3 kids also go to camp, and 2 in the same year, because I had a 5th grader and a 7th grader, you know, it can be costly to have to budget for that. And while there are fundraisers, you know, parents are captive donors. You know, we're captive donors, so pretty much a lot of this is coming out of our pockets as parents, or, you know, we're going to our families and friends, and, you know, it would be nice if we could come up with something that affects all of our students, 5th and 7th graders, to, you know, offset some of those costs so that we don't feel like we're constantly out there with our hand out. You know, and it's like, and while a calendar is a unique way to do it, for me, that was always a hard fundraiser to do, because the people that are donating or picking the days, they're not getting anything for other than the satisfaction of helping your kid go to camp. You know, at least with the cards, you got a card and you could use it and get some discounts and stuff, but, you know, or if you're selling chocolates or something, you know, you're getting something for your donation. But I mean, I think it's a really fantastic program. It does affect all of our kids, because everyone has the opportunity to be able to go. I just think it'd be nice if we could figure some way to help sustain it a little bit too.
And just to add to that, my child couldn't go to camp that 5th grade year because it was COVID. And that's a huge transition between 5th and 6th grade. And she really struggled going into that 6th grade. There was a lot, that's a massive transition after going from your little elementary schools to. So having that at the end of your 5th grade year, I think really does set up an easier and smoother transition into this big, you know, Bothwell school where everybody kind of comes together. And I also, again, I feel like a broken record here, but I think we sometimes assume that being up here in the Upper Peninsula and the, you know, beautiful and swimming all the time, and that these are just, and going to camps, and that these are just experiences that every child has. But, you know, we know what our free and reduced lunch rate is, and we've got some kids we've got pockets of kids, not 1 or 2 or 5% of our kids or 10% of our kids. We got chunks of our kids that do not have the same experiences that many of us have. And they deserve it as much as our kid does. And to be out there and really have some environmental education and have some team building, whatever we can do to make this easier for families right now, I approve, support, all of that.
Yeah, just to add, you know, when you talk about, there's a fundraiser for everything nowadays. I mean, well, as those business owners, I mean, and the community knows there's a fundraiser for everything. Yep. And so, you know, I you know, to maybe reduce that a little bit would be a one additional ask. So
For parents too.
Yeah, I mean, and up until COVID hit, the elementaries would do the chili cook-off, which was actually a really great fundraiser, but COVID kind of made that go away, and it hasn't really come back. You know, it's kind of along the lines of like a booster club. We used to have a booster club that would help with a lot of our, you know, athletics and things like that, and that doesn't exist anymore. And same with the chili cook-off. I mean, it was, you know, something that benefited all of the elementaries that has kind of gone away because of COVID, or since COVID. And there just hasn't been anything to kind of backfill that.
Are you thinking about a reduction in the cost of per kid, or are you thinking along the lines of having the school cover this opportunity for the kids? I think when I went to Bay Cliff, when I was at Sandy Knoll, I don't remember a cost associated with that at
Right.
that time. I mean, the same thing with driver's ed, and I know that there's been a variance in some of those other things, but I don't remember a cost. I don't know when that changed.
Right, and
but-
I don't remember that being a thing either, at having a cost. I mean, I think if there was a way for us to help reduce the costs, maybe not completely eliminate, that would be good. I mean, I think that part of it is you want the families and the kids to pay something. Because I think you want some ownership in going to camp. You know, whether it's like, I'm part of Camp Up Peninsula, the summer camp for type 1 diabetics, and the fee is $10 for 5 days, or $20. And it's just, I think that you have to have something that you have to pay so you feel a sense of ownership in it, and then you also want to go because, well, I paid that money, so I want to be there.
When are you looking at making this effective? For this year or the next?
I mean, that's something that I think we could talk about. I mean, I don't know how much it would be, or if it's something that we would do for next year, like pay to play. I mean, I just know that I've had people, at my work come through my lane, and they'll talk about stuff like that. That, they like, oh, did you hear that Bay Cliff went up this year, or that this went up, or we're doing this fundraiser now. I mean, families are struggling. My family is struggling. I mean, it's.
Have we started to collect for these fees yet?
I know the elementary actually has a meeting, I included the parent letter. in
All the
next-
letters went out already.
Yeah.
I know that, but I mean, that,
The fifth and the middle school.
I know
Very-
fifth
very
grade
soon,
got them.
Very soon.
Just because I was going to say, if we could make this effective and vote on that, or make that, might be too late to.
Well, it's a committee of the whole, so
Well, right,
In
no,
2
no,
weeks.
it's
Oh, in
only
2
2
weeks.
weeks.
Yeah,
on the
that's what I'm
22nd.
saying. I don't know if it's too late already to make this, a reality for this year. I don't know.
I would say in 2 weeks' time, they would definitely have started collecting money.
How many students are we talking about in the 5th grade? In the 7th grade?
250
Yeah,
for each.
275.
But yeah, if not this year, I mean, if it's reasonable this year, great. But if not, I mean, to your point, reducing the elementary fee to $25 and the middle school fee to $50 or
Something like that.
something
Yeah.
along those lines, I think it'd be great. Again, if we can make it a reality this year, great. I just don't know. I don't want to put an additional burden on our administrators.
And we have had sometimes, I think, where we've like refunded, or parent groups have refunded for things.
That was my question, like what kind of lift for everybody involved would it be to go back through and refund after the money's been collected? Your belief right now is that they have started to collect, you would know too, have they started to collect monies?
I haven't written a check yet, but I had the letter right before spring break.
Asking for it,
asking,
yeah,
so,
okay.
Between now and
And do you know when that, either one of you know when that due date
it was
is?
later April, I believe.
I can look up the letter if you give me a minute, but
Yeah,
it's
well-
coming up soon.
And I guess my whole thought about this too is that, Bay Cliff is something, if they weren't at Bay Cliff, they would be in school. So every day that they're at Bay Cliff, it's a school day. We collect money from the state for them to be in school.
Well, I mean, if you just take, let's say 500 students and that's $75 per, that's, $37,500, 25% off is, reducing it down by $9,000 basically. And then, but half is gonna be $18,750 to the district to make this happen. Again, we have to remember that there was a gap anyways too, but I mean, every student gets half. I mean, again, when we're talking, I don't know, these are the things that matter most and help the students, and
The deadline for the elementary is May 1st
okay.
for collecting the money.
And do they go before the 7th grade? Isn't the 7th grade
Correct.
right at the end?
Yeah, they're after.
Correct.
Yeah.
5th grade's first.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's something that I remember, and it's something that I really benefited from. Because, I mean, again, it is something that the 5th graders, you're in a cabin with kids from other schools.
Sure.
And you're kind of, getting along with them and like meeting them. And then when you go to the middle school, and it's like, oh, I remember you.
Yeah, it's not as
You know?
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it's overwhelming for little 5th graders to
Oh,
move
for
into
sure.
that school. Woof.
And I think for 7th graders, I think it's a good time for them too, to be able to go
Yeah.
and, do some of the different things that they get to experience by going a couple of days later or longer,
Even going up there as a parent, I remember in 7th grade, they were so proud for that parent night. They thought it was hilarious. I mean, it was totally corny, but you acted like it was the best thing you have ever seen because
Oh,
they
yeah.
were so happy.
Well, and it's also something that our high schoolers
Yeah.
also participate
Yeah, they
in, because they
love
go there as counselors. And I think for them to go and see the younger kids, and for the younger kids to see the older kids, it's a huge
Oh,
thing
it's
for
a
them.
huge thing. My kids didn't go to the camp as students, but they, camp counselors, and loved it. It was the best thing ever.
It's
So-
a really special place.
It
We're
is,
really
it
lucky
is.
to have
And the fact that every student experiences it ideally, right?
Yeah.
So, and has the opportunity to, that's a shared community experience that kind of,
Cement you into this community.
So, I mean, that's all I had for that. I think it's definitely something that we could look at for next week, or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, moving on to the MSHS logo. The submission deadline has come and gone. We received, I think it was 20 to 30 different images. So just kind of looking at next steps from here. I believe that we're going to be meeting with, the executive board is going to be meeting with the students next week.
Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday, to have a discussion with them and kind of show them some of the different images and kind of see what they're thinking. I think we've all seen the different submissions that have come in. I think that there is a lot of great ideas there. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the kids think. And then I believe we're going to also enlist the help of a professional to kind of help us come up with a good, solid logo that would be ready to be put out there to the
So is your idea kind of the executive committee's idea to take those submissions, put them in front of student governance, get some feedback, and then take that feedback with those existing images into a, professional atmosphere to see how they can be polished and changed? I got it. That sounds great.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of really good concepts, and there are even a handful that I thought could work, as is. However, I think without just wanting to have something chosen immediately, I think the smartest thing to make sure that you have something that's long-lasting and has a lot of wide support from, a big percentage of the community. I think we take that feedback and input, and maybe there's minimal tweaks, maybe there's some big changes that are recommended, but I think it helps to have some ideas there to help us navigate, where we want to go with it, rather than just pulling something completely out of the ether. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there was like one particular image that like really was like, wow, that's it.
Yeah.
I think that there was quite a few bits and pieces of different images that we got that if we could combine them or, you know, that it might work better. But, I mean, I was happy and excited to see some of the different concepts that people came up with. You know, there's definitely, you know, some lighthouse themes and some, you know, as some people like to say, red Sparty themes.
Seeing what the kids like is gonna be really important too.
Yes, yeah.
Getting their feedback.
And just the nature of this as opposed to a single word, essentially a noun, when we solicited the support and input from the community and students. When you start to talk about imaging, that's a multifaceted piece, and then you start to work in a single word with it. That just by nature of that, you're going to have it be multi-tiered, multi-step. So it's one thing to collect 3,000 potential names or 2,500 potential names. It's another thing to get everything locked in, and you're just going to have to go through revision and mock-up. So great.
Right. And I think what ends up being printed on jerseys, that might be a piece of like the total concept.
Sure.
You know, like you might have a concept image that you're pulling a part out to have embroidered on.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, when I think of the, you know, I do look forward to hearing what the students have to say, because when I think of the video that they put out so quickly,
Yes.
that was blew my mind. I mean, it was powerful, it was meaningful, and they took ownership, and that was really exciting to see. I've watched it multiple times since,
Oh,
you know.
for
So I think that it'll be interesting. I can't wait to hear what they kind of think of these images and where their vision is with this.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, ultimately, the kids are gonna be the ones wearing it on
Exactly.
their jerseys. So we definitely want them to have
Right.
input.
Well, and the fact that they were leaning into the lighthouse just shocked me. I was like, okay, you know, it was a great video, very well done.
Yeah,
Very
they
cute.
did an amazing job
Yeah.
on that video. Any further comments about the logo? All right. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to discuss at the committee of the whole? Okay, then we will move on to comments from the public. We have one. Ms. Brum?
Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street. I've got a lot to cover and only 5 minutes to cover it in, so I'll be speaking faster than I normally do. Want to give a heads up to the board that the decision on the recall petition will be appealed this week for the simple reason that based on what was in the minutes, there doesn't appear to be any way a recall petition in the city of Marquette can be approved, because all that was written was that it was unapproved because it wasn't specific enough, and there's no guidance as to how to make it be more specific, which is exactly why the first recall petition was unapproved. So it's going to be appealed. That'll be later this week. You can expect in the next months to come a regular series of Freedom of Information Act requests from me. Basically, I'm focusing on finance, the original invoices that the school is receiving and who they're receiving from, who the school is doing business with on a regular basis. And also I'll be requesting the board member emails as well, because it's not just who you're paying, it's who you're talking to that needs to be made public. All of this is going to cost money, and I wanted to thank Board Member Cambenzi for making us aware of a website that put it into a different logo. And this particular logo, I think, was supposed to be me, but I didn't recognize it at first. But then I looked at the glasses and the cigarette butts in the heading, and I realized it was mine. And if it weren't for you, I wouldn't know anything about it. Therefore, taken upon myself to take the logo and make it into a t-shirt, and I'll be selling these to fundraise in order to raise the money to pay for the Freedom of Information Act. So if anybody else would like to take some humorous interest in this, I'll be happy to make it into a t-shirt, because I'm always looking for ways to fundraise. As you know, the money for the school board situation is separate from the campaign money. And I have these right now, by the way, if anyone would like them, I can give a school board discount of up to 15% if any of you would like to order them before the room is open. Number 4, tonight I heard that you're working on your logo. I'm not just somebody who comes here to tell you that I'm concerned about what you've done. I'm a taxpayer and I can see you stumbling into another bad situation. So I'm just gonna give you a heads up that I would give to anyone. Before you release your logo, you need to file a copyright application and you need to file a trademark application. And if you're gonna split your logo up into bits and pieces where some of it appears in total and some of it appears in bits and pieces, you need to have separate applications on all of those. And if you're gonna hire an expert, which is perfectly fine, many people do, you need to have a contract with that expert that requires him to admit that it is a work made for hire, so that the school board owns the copyright from the beginning, and you don't have to go through the absolute ridiculousness of having him get the copyright in his own name and then assign it to the school board, which costs extra money. And I'm not kidding you when I say this, this is black letter law. And I have seen the city of Marquette mess this up time and time again. They pay a fortune for art and they don't get the phrase work made for hire in the contract, and the city does not own the art. And I don't want to see that happening with you and your new logo. And before you release it, would you please file your trademark application and your copyright application so I don't have to get into, what's the phrase I'm looking for? I don't have to be rebuked for daring to file mine before you file yours. So I'm giving you a heads up, and that law I just quoted to you is black letter law. I'm not messing with you, I'm not teasing you. Work made for hire is the magic phrase. And number 5, this is gonna sound a little bit awkward, but my day today started with a phone call from somebody I didn't know. A resident of Marquette who graduated Marquette Senior High School is coming back this summer for a reunion. We chatted about this, that, and the other thing. And he said, I wanted you to know how much every time the school board says something about you, he had a word for the letter, for the lawyer you've got in Wisconsin, but I'm too professional to mention it. I want you to know my friends and I discuss it, and every time your school board goes after you, you get more votes for the 109th district. So I want to thank you for the criticism and the sympathy and the empathy, of course, that you showed me last week. I have no sympathy and no empathy for the school board. You wanted these jobs, you fought for these jobs, you got elected to these jobs, you deserve these jobs. And with the jobs, you get criticism from the public. It's a public reality. So by all means, keep up the good work of criticizing me instead of looking in the mirror and looking at what you've done yourself. And I finish with plenty of time to go. Thank you very much.
All right. Moving on to board member comments. We'll start with Mr. Zdunek.
No additional comment today, thank you.
Mrs. Maddox-Smith.
Not too much, just I want to thank Jason for doing all the work on this pay to play. That was awesome, and I look forward to the Bay Cliff and pay to play, what we can do for our kids. That's why we're here, and it's just great work.
Ms. Ray.
Just thanks. Appreciate everyone being here. That's all.
Mrs. Clip.
Yeah, again, pay to play, whatever we can do to get these kids, get some relief for these families, get as many kids as we can attached to this school in whatever way we can do it. The data's clear. There's no loss there. And of course, we will be flexible and fiscally minded always, but thank you. That was a big push. Appreciate it.
Mr. Hewitt.
No additional comments, thanks.
Board president comments, I have none. Moving on to announcements and other meetings. April 22nd, 2024, regular meeting, 5:30 here in the library. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mrs. Clip. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.